President Biden addresses a joint session of Congress tonight, speaking to Republicans and Democrats alike, although fewer of both because of COVID restrictions. For a view of President Biden's ambitious agenda from the Republican side, welcome now Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska. Senator, welcome back. Great to have you here.
Good to be on the show, David. Thanks.
As you listen to this tonight, what are you particularly going to be focused on that President Biden is saying?
Well, look, I think in some ways we're kind of beyond words because the president gave a speech about unity for his inauguration speech, but did not act in that manner at all. So what I'm really focused on is actions. You know, one issue that's really important to me, I highly doubt he's going to raise it, is to kind of call a ceasefire on the war on Alaska's working families and our economy. We've had over 9 executive orders from the Biden administration just singularly focused on Alaska. Almost all of them to kill jobs, restrict our economic growth. And it's obviously something we don't want. I'd love a ceasefire in the war on Alaska. I'd welcome his chance to finally discuss securing the border. I was down on the border. It is a crisis with several senators recently, and yet the president, vice president, they don't talk about it. They don't go down there. People should go down there, listen, learn to see what we're going to see, what's happening on the border. I'll be surprised if he talks about that, but he needs to. And then, you know, I'm sure he's going to talk about climate, but, you know, a central element of his climate plan right now is to restrict the production of American energy, kill jobs, and promise good jobs 2 decades in the future. So that's not working for my state. I don't think it's working for the country. We're going to be putting forward our own climate, environment, jobs, and economic growth strategy soon. It's going to be much better, much stronger, and I think accepted by the middle class of America here soon. But these are all issues that I think are important, and I hope he acts on them.
Senator, one of the things that's caught a lot of attention for people on the Bloomberg terminal, watching Bloomberg, listening to Bloomberg, are some of the proposals about tax increases. What is your reaction to what you're hearing?
Well, look, we've had good discussions on the infrastructure bill that the Republicans are putting forward. There's actually been good discussions with Democrats and even the White House on the opportunity to expand the base with regard to user fees, possibly on infrastructure. But there's not an appetite on our side to look at raising taxes more broadly on families, on middle-class families, small businesses across the country when we're still in a recession. We actually think that the 2017 jobs and tax cut bill that we passed did exactly what we had predicted. It created enormous surge in good-paying jobs, strong economic growth. It stopped the inversions that were driving capital offshore. It brought hundreds of billions of dollars back to America. We think that was working before the pandemic. So there's not a lot of appetite from our perspective to change those numbers, particularly as we're still getting out of a recession.
Senator, you mentioned small businesses, which has been a concern throughout this pandemic, as we know small businesses generate a lot of the jobs in this country, the disproportionate share, frankly. But at the same time, most of those small businesses are not subchapter C, right? They're pass-through subchapter S's partnerships, yes. And they would not really be affected, would they?
Well, look, the details are what will matter. As you know, what the president has proposed, there's a lot of focus on the corporate tax rate, but we need to see the details. He talks about, you know, he won't touch middle-class families. Again, how do you define that with 2 earners? So we need to see the details. But again, David, the broader discussion right now is we are not supportive of major tax increases right now, given where our country has been in this pandemic. And as you know, a lot of times there'll be discussions about taxes, and they have a way to kind of drift down on middle-class families, on small businesses, so I'm a skeptic.
As a practical matter, you're in the Senate. There is the filibuster rule there. If he moves forward on these, can he avoid the filibuster rule? Can he do it by reconciliation?
Well, look, it depends on what the issue is. There's a lot that's in their infrastructure bill that clearly would not be able to move forward with regard to reconciliation. The parliamentarian makes that call. But I think that in the Senate, there is a you know, there's been a lot of Democrats who are pushing for getting rid of the filibuster. It's ironic. 3 years ago, over 60 senators wrote the leadership of the Senate saying, don't get rid of the filibuster. That's when President Trump was president and the Republicans were in the majority. But it'll depend on what the parliamentarian rules with regard to the specific provisions you're talking about.
Senator, finally, I want to touch on something that's a fairly unusual story coming out of Iran, where there apparently was some sort of recorded oral history, purportedly with the foreign minister, Mr. Zarif, with John Kerry, who's, of course, the former Secretary of State here. And you've reacted very strongly to it. Give us what you take away from that recording. Assume it's right, because we don't know that it's right. Goodness knows there are things coming out of Iran we can't rely on. But assume it's true.
Right. Well, look, David, what I did, I went down to the floor of the Senate on Monday. And by the way, I've never done this before. I've never asked for any official, Biden administration, Trump administration, Obama administration, during my term in the Senate to resign. You know, I've been tempted, but I haven't. But I asked for the resignation of John Kerry. And if he doesn't resign, he should be fired if this is true. Now, we got to figure out if it's true. I think it certainly looks like it's true. But here's what he did. If he told the foreign minister of Iran, Foreign Minister Zarif, about secret information on Israeli operations against the Iranians in Syria, one of our most important allies in the world, Israel, to the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, Iran, a country with the blood of thousands of American soldiers on its hands, this is this is a treasonous act, in my view, and I don't say that lightly. So, to me, it would be unacceptable to sell out one of our most important allies, and doing it with certainly the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. If that happened, he needs to resign or be fired immediately. I'm going to be sending a letter to the president later today with several senators saying, Mr. President, you need to look into this. You need to get to the bottom of this. And if it happened, he's got to go.
At the same time, Senator, you were in the military. You've had some dealings with Iran, and you know you got to be very careful because it's not always what it appears. Mr. Zarif supposedly was going to run for president. You wonder who leaked this and for what purpose. There may be sort of internal political reasons that may motivate this, that may undermine the credibility of it.
Look, there's a lot that we need to find out about this, and I don't disagree with you. You certainly can't trust the Iranians. But if this tape is true, and even in that tape, Zarif says he was astonished that John Kerry would tell him something like that. So even he's admitting how really outrageous this is. If it's true, and we got to find this out, Kerry needs to go. He needs to resign. He needs to be fired. Remember, he is currently a member of the National Security Council in the Biden administration. He holds an important job. And here's something else on this, David.
Right.
If this is true, think about how many allies are going to want to work with John Kerry. Yeah. The answer is none. So, again, his effectiveness will be zero. I think this is an act that borders on treasonous if it's true, and he needs to be fired or resign.
Well, it's certainly a story that we're going to continue to follow. Thank you so much. Great to have you back with us. That's Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican of Alaska.